I'm Tom Palmer and I'm a children's author, and I've written the book After the War, which is aimed at children 9+. And After the War is the story of the Windermere children. And while I was writing it, I knew it was really important to get my facts right, as Trevor said in the last video. And so I worked very closely with Trevor Avery and the Lake District Holocaust Project to make sure every scene in the book is based on a primary source, so the testimony of one of the survivors. So everything in this book is based on one of the recordings of the Lake District Holocaust Project website, but also on some of these stories Trevor has told me when he's been speaking to the boys. And if you're familiar with some of those recordings and the stories themselves, of course, you'll recognise some of them, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read the first chapter to give you an idea of how the book begins. And the book actually begins in the skies above here, just as the aeroplane is about to land. The first of the Sterling bombers is about to land. And I've not used any specific character of the 300 children. I've made composite characters out of the memories of several of the boys and put them into three main characters. And they're the characters in here, and they're called Yossi, Leo and Mordecai. Chapter 1. Even though he was afraid, Yossi forced himself to crawl to the window in the side of the aeroplane. There were no seats, so he had to crouch and stay on all fours as he and the other passengers were thrown about by the turbulence. Outside, you could see a wall of white and a wing wobbling so hard it looked like it might fall off. Behind him, Yossi heard children cry out and the sound of at least one person being sick, and some laughter too. "Come and sit down here, Yossi," a woman's voice called out. Yossi did as he was told, scrambling along the floor of the Sterling bomber to rejoin the other children and adults sitting on blankets. Yossi loved aeroplanes. He should have been scared of them, as the first time he'd seen one 6 years ago, at the beginning of the war, a German bomber had tried to destroy his hometown in Poland. Then, over the following years, he'd seen bombs falling from British and American aeroplanes, targeting the factories where he was forced to work. But still, he loved them, perhaps because aeroplanes were a sign that change was coming. And once he was in the concentration camps, Yossi was desperate for change. He was also fascinated by these powerful machines. How could a huge piece of metal with all these people on board take off and then land without breaking into pieces? Yossi glanced at the faces of the two boys closest to him. Didn't it worry them? The boys in question were Mordecai and Leo. Both of them were 15 years old, like Yossi, and both seemed to be focusing so hard on what they were doing, they were barely aware that they were bouncing around in the clouds. Mordecai, short with dark hair, was reading an English book. Yossi admired him so much because he could hold a conversation in German, Russian, Czech and Polish. He also admired Mordecai could concentrate on reading even now as they hurtled towards the ground. Tall, blonde-haired Leo was busy too. For most of the flight, he'd been trying to get at a spool of wire that was jammed down the side of the fuselage. Yossi knew that Leo would plan to use the wire or trade it with someone. He was always on the lookout for any opportunity. Now the plane lunged suddenly to the left and some of the children called out in fear. Yossi dragged himself to the window again to look out. Squinting in the bright light, he could see a range of mountains ahead, blue sparkling water beyond, and miles of green fields. They were out of the clouds over England. This was a place where they'd been told they would be safe, a place there would be no German soldiers and no concentration camps. The only thing that Yossi knew about England was a distant memory of his father's bicycle. It was very special. So special a bicycle that tyres needed to be imported from another country. On the tyres, moulded into the rubber, were the words, "Made in England." "What can you see out of the window, Leo?" asked Yossi. "What does it look like?" "I see paradise," Yossi replied. "Tell us more," Talia said. Talia was a young woman who had come to take the children from the concentration camp in Europe to England and refuge. Yossi understood why she was asking. Talia wanted Yossi to reassure this group of children who had spent the last 6 years terrified of what would happen to them next. "It is beautiful," Yossi told the other children, turning to smile at them. "There are fields and roads and small villages, just like back home in Poland." Yossi stopped speaking once he saw some of the children frown at the mention of their homeland. "But this is England," Yossi said quickly. "They're going to feed us, they're going to give us clothes. We'll be safe, won't we, Talia?" Talia nodded. "What if it's not like that?" Mordecai asked Yossi quietly. Once they were sat together again. "It will be like that, Mordy." But Yossi's words were lost as the plane's engines began to roar ever louder, and he felt a rush of fear. The aeroplane was about to land. Was England a nice place? Would it be safe? "How do we know?" Mordecai asked again, his voice tense. So that's the first chapter in the book, and that's the moment the airplanes touched down and landed here at Crosby-on-Eden airfield, as it was known then. And in writing that, I'm telling the story of the Windermere boys, but also when writing this book for children, I want children to know about the Holocaust, and I want them to understand what happened. And part of the reason for that is so that people who are in situations of danger and difficulty in their own countries, when they come to this country, we'll treat them well. And that's why I wanted to put in that reference at the end towards the children are coming here, but they're still afraid of what's going to happen when they come to England, as children and people coming to this country might well be now. Anyway, thank you for listening, and that was the first chapter.